Let's get started. First, I express my gratitude for not giving me the 4 o'clock slot today. There's I heard there's a baseball game in town. Any Blue Jays fans in the crowd? Toronto Blue Jays today play a very important game. So I'm from Boston. So all the AL East good wishes are with you today in Toronto. But turning to our topic today, what's next for digital magazines? I thought we could start with look at the broad context for magazines relative to other media. As you all know, when we look at music, we look at movies, even books, the progression of their business model to digital has been much more rapid than we've seen with magazines. When you look at the progression of these media, magazines still in the single digits in terms of the impact of that revenue on the overall picture of this $100 billion industry. And yet, when you look at the forecasts, this is the brightest area of the industry. Triple-digit growth for digital circulation over the next 4 years. Very strong growth for digital advertising. In fact, leading the economics of the industry is the necessity of getting digital magazines right. And so the question is, if we look at this moving from a single digit, moving into double digits and beyond for digital magazines, how that happens or what is required for that to happen, getting from here to there. At Zinio, we have the privilege of working with more than 1,000 publishers around the world. And so we get to hear their stories of the day-to-day parts of what it takes to get digital magazines in market, how to do it cost effectively, what the challenges are. And so through those conversations, what I want to take you through is what we're hearing and what we think is required. And I've got 9 points I want to work through. These are the practicalities of delivering digital magazines in a mobile format that's relevant and helps, again, advance the industry to the growth that is now forecast. And they cover a variety of areas from how the pages are rendered to how you work with advertising to what the business models might be, to how to work with different operating systems. All these are part of the mix of what's required to be successful from the conversations we have with our global publishing partners. So let's start with the first. First, because it's first and also most important, this mobile optimized experience question. So looking at it first from the standpoint of the consumer. When we look at the billions of connected devices today, you see at the bottom the laptops and the PCs, 15, 20%. And then at the top, the tablets, representing another roughly 15%. That vast swath in the middle, that big blue bar, 70% or so of the marketplace, are smartphones. And so clearly, if we're going to where the consumer is, we have to solve for getting magazines relevant on that device. So flipping around and looking at it from the magazine publisher's perspective, if you look at the top 2,000 publications that are online today in apps, more than 90% are not optimized for smartphones. So we have this paradox where consumers are here and magazines are not delivering a product that is as relevant and as useful as it needs to be for us to see the kind of adoption and success that are required to get to those growth rates. And just so there was nothing's lost in translation here, I want to show you what I'm talking about when I say native smartphone app. And it's a phenomenon you're all familiar with. So I'm going to show you a Rolling Stone app that's not native. And it will just show you very briefly the cover. It's a recent issue, Dr. Dre, and then 2 front-of-the-book features. One is a part of the table of contents, and one is something called Fast Tracks. So you'll see the navigation, which you've all experienced personally, but I just want to draw the contrast for you. So you all know the pinching, the squeezing, the taking the page, cramming it down to the smartphone size, and then asking the consumer to do work, to actually work through that, to find the part that they're looking for, blow that up, expand it, bring it down. Now I want to show you that same issue in a native experience. So quite simply, we're asking the consumer to go from a two-handed experience today, meaning they have to hold their phone, pinch, zoom, and do the work with the other hand. So it's a two-handed magazine experience to one-handed, which is what we all know is the way that people on the go are using there and consuming content. So it's a flip, and it's an easy access. It's legible. It's taking the work not and putting it on the consumer's side, but putting it on the technology side to deliver content in a way that's very compelling and very mobile optimized. So that's point one. Point two, and somewhat related, is the issue of discoverability. We know that there's 1.5 million apps now just in the iOS App Store, so getting your app discovered is another real practicality we hear from consumers or from publishers of what they're facing as they go about developing their strategies. And if we look at just the iOS App Store, discoverability was heretofore in the newsstand. We did have a sort of segregated part of the App Store that was dedicated to newspapers, magazines. That not necessarily very well merchandised. You can see if I looked at the automotive category, not a terribly compelling experience for the consumer. And the newsstand now, of course, has gone away with the latest operating system, OS 9. But in its place, Apple is giving the magazine industry something that is much more compelling than this newsstand as a way to be discovered. And it's not Apple News, which is its own double-edged sword as the newsstand was, but it's the APIs that Apple is now making available, and other operating systems we believe will in the future as well. What that means is that, and what the advantage that the magazine industry has in using these APIs is the amount of content that is available for indexing through these APIs. So you're basically exposing, the millions, thousands, millions of articles and words that you have in your app, and giving that, indexing that with the Apple search engine, and that's now on the -1 screen of OS 9 devices. So you can imagine a world where when someone goes and searches, they don't search for a magazine title, and you're not limited to the magazine title for that search. But to give you an example, you could search, if you're interested in sports, Lionel Messi, and you can imagine the experience being that search is able to go into the app, find that content, and bring back the app title. So it takes it from a title and keyword point of view to the entire corpus of that content being exposed and being discoverable online. So it's a huge change maker in the ability for magazine apps to be discovered, particularly because when you think about the depth of content that magazines have versus all the other apps, the depth of content is so much more extensive, and so the advantages that magazines have in this discoverability arms race is very, very high. Now, both these issues, this discoverability I've talked about, and the experience on native, and bringing a native experience to the smartphone, require the technology to change from where it is today. It's not a flat file PDF where the text is embedded on a page, but it's extracted, it's put into XML, it's made indexable, and that work is necessary for all these benefits to accrue to you. And so as you look at your own technology planning or the partner you're working with, it's imperative that you have an XML-based solution so you can deliver on these two areas of importance. So moving to our third, cross-platform entitled. Again, if we look at this from the consumer's point of view first, you take a Netflix or a Spotify or broadly known consumer brands, and it's a very well-known, very understood experience. You log in, or you sign up for an account, and you can log in anywhere. It's a log in anywhere and everywhere concept that is very universally and easily understood today. In the magazine world, we make it a little more harder, more difficult. So if you're a print subscriber, it's not necessarily you're entitled on the online side, and then where online can you access it? So we have work to do in this regard, but then again, that is also a question you want to put on your agenda, internal development or partner you're working with, to make sure they really have a strategy for dealing with the APIs and the technical underpinnings that allow you to get this beginnings of a universal login, the same thing that consumers expect in other media categories. The business model variety, also an important consideration. The magazine industry has done a wonderful job of building variety into the topics they cover, into the magazines they offer. And even with the advent of online, the business models have evolved, but the business models are changing much more rapidly than the industry in terms of the number of opportunities, the ways that you can take a mobile-enabled world and deliver content in a compelling way that leads to a good economic outcome. And that means going beyond just apps to being in placements in libraries, placements on all-you-can-eat models, placements in in-flight entertainment or cruise ships. There's a proliferation of where media is intersecting with consumers that magazine publishers need to be open-minded about in terms of exploiting to truly take advantage of this always-on world, and the fact that content won't always be in the same container. It needs to be deployed in a way, and you need to work with a partner that can deploy it in multiple formats and in multiple fashions. My fifth point on advertising, and this relates to the same, in many ways, the same point made at the outset about the need to sort of liberate the text from the page. We also need to liberate the advertising. So if you look at historic advertising on your iPad edition, your smartphone edition, we're taking the same thing, the PDF ad, and we're placing it in the issue alongside all the other static content. And we've replicated what we have in the analog world. And while that's effective, because we all know that in most categories, advertising is content. We talked with a panel before me was talking about fashion, that the fashion magazines, the advertising is in many ways as anticipated as the editorial content, or a lot of enthusiast categories. And so it's important that we take advantage of the fact that content can be just as engaging on the advertising side as it is on the content side. And so you'd begin to see the ability to have your platform able to, or work with partners that can actually traffic advertising inside the app. So think about that. It's not that you're inside the app, and there's platforms now that will allow you to do the same kind of targeting and precision marketing that you've gotten used to on the web. So real-time interaction of who that user is, what their demographics are, and serving them advertising relevant, and in many ways having activity from that because they are already exposed to you as someone who is ready to click. And so moving from a paradigm of static and fixed to interactive and engaging on the advertising side is a whole nother avenue of growth. And as you saw in the statistics I opened with, another part of the industry that's forecasted to grow. And so it's important as you do your planning that you either work with or have a platform that allows you to do this plug-in with a double click for publishers or other third-party tool that allows you to make this happen. And my sixth area, this uniform data analysis, which is maybe boring but important, in that if you look at the challenge that publishers have when they go from a world where it was just doing an app on the iOS store, now they've got Windows and Amazon and Samsung and WebTrends and GA. So there's all these places where your data is being collected. And that's a huge burden, not just on the work required to log in every day and figure what that is, but then to make sense of it, to homogenize it, to assimilate it, to make it coherent. And so, again, it's important to think through how you do that assimilation, either in your own platform or with a partner you work with, so that there is this uniform dashboard that you're getting. And that's not just to make it simple, but think about how much information is being thrown at you from all these places, in often cases in real time. And part of the benefit is this dynamic ability to do dynamic adjustment. So which stories are trending, or where my downloads are, where there's a hiccup in an anomaly in my trends that I can identify and investigate it. If you have to literally go from serially logging in one by one, it's not a very workable model. And my next point on continuous publishing articleization, you've heard a lot about articleization and the notion that we're atomizing the world of publishing to the benefit of consumers, so they're not just tied to a fixed experience, but a linear experience, but can have kind of the relational database of content served to them and articulated for them. One of the phrases from this morning's discussion was this idea of going from months to moments. And we all know that magazines will always have this wonderful appeal of being a thing you sit down with and enjoy cover to cover. That will always be an enduring part of the magazine industry's contribution to the enjoyment of the medium. But we're also living in a world where that's complemented by this 100 times a day, we heard this morning that people are going to this device. And so this marriage of the analog and pleasure of this linear reading with the kind of frenetic ADHD that happens on that right-hand picture, it's an important element of the ingredients or the recipe you need to be successful. And an important sort of component of this is that it's not just that you are figuring out a way to articleize or atomize your content, but in fact, inside your app, you're not recreating what we have in the analog world, meaning it's a download once a month. So if you're doing a monthly, you don't want the experience to be, well, I go to my title, my brand title, my app once a month, because that's what the frequency is of this publication. You need to make sure that your platform or your partner has the ability to continually push content inside the app so that that app becomes dynamic. It becomes a habit. It becomes something they want to consult with, because the latest news about the Pope or about the runway show can be found inside the app. So it takes away this barrier that the app is a fixed point in time. It's on this periodic schedule, and we marry these two worlds of continuous publishing based on the functionality inside that app, of having an ability to have continuously updating content. Another important factor as you think through the strategy. And then iOS and its brethren. Everyone that has started with digital publishing really the eureka moment was the iPad, obviously based on iOS, and everyone rushed to create iPad apps. And so you can see that reflected in the magnitude of iOS and the statistic on the left. But then you look on the right, and it presents a very different world. There's as many Windows devices as there are iOS devices, and of course Android towering them all. And one of the things we think that we believe strongly as we go forward 2016 and beyond is that this imbalance will correct. We have very smart companies listed on this slide, and Apple has pioneered the way of building an app store and building a substantial material business around apps. But you have in Android and all of its variants. You have in Windows. You have at Amazon. You have very compelling platforms that have millions of consumers. And they know that magazines are in a very important category for the appeal of that platform, because there's a lot of value that people get out of the media, magazines, music, movies. And so we think that this profile will change over the next few years, where Android and Windows will become, in terms of the number of magazine apps, need to become much more of a universal world. And so the importance for you is to think through a workflow that allows you to publish once and distribute everywhere, so that it isn't a question of just serving one operating system and dismissing the others, because while the economics have favored iOS, we believe that's going to change. And a related point is the platform requirements themselves. So if you look at the left-hand side of this screen, you'll see the same magazine on 3 different devices. We see Windows, iOS, and Android. And what you should notice is that the devices are different, but the magazine presentation is exactly the same. So what's happened here is that the publisher has created an iOS app, and it usually starts with iOS, and then they say, well, we're going to clone this and put it onto Android, and we're going to put it onto Windows. So we're covered. And what's happened is that the other platforms, the non-OIS platforms, recognize that what they are is a store full of clones of iOS. And to my earlier point about them recognizing that there is an opportunity in the magazine market to be a more substantial participant, the thing that comes with that is the differentiation of those platforms from a user perspective and from their standards by how they want to design interactions on those platforms. So on the right are those same devices based on the standards that currently exist from, on the right-hand side, Google Material Design, and on the left, the new Windows 10 designs. These companies have put a lot of work into saying we don't want to be a clone machine. We recognize there's value here and there's volume here. So how do we change the user interface paradigm to reflect the fact that we want to have a distinct presentation of the world? And that's happening right now. So it comes back to your checklist of practicalities, as I called them. It's important that you're not publishing clone applications, and that either your own technology development or your partner is able to take the core content doesn't change that much, but all the stuff around it does. The user interactions are special, and you might think these are very subtle, but they're taken very seriously by those who have designed these with a lot of thought. And so having an ability to get to a publish once and distribute everywhere strategy that respects the requirements of the operating system is another important ingredient. So that's 9 in a whirlwind. Our checklist, and again, I say your because it very much is based on the feedback that the Zinio team gets from the public conversations we have with you around the world throughout the months and those recent conversations. And it's why, in fact, as we thought through the Zinio Pro platform that we're launching at this conference, those requirements are all built in based on those conversations, so we can be as relevant as possible as your partners in making this mobile world happen and getting the growth that you deserve. So with that, I have a few minutes left for any questions that you'd like to answer or the audience would like to tackle.
Thank you, Kelly. That was really interesting. Thank you very much for that. One question that occurs to me before throwing it open to the floor. Most of those 9 points relate to individual publishers with their own brands. Clearly what's lurking behind all this is all you can eat, which is really what Spotify and Netflix offer, is massive inventory. Where do you see all you can eat? I know Zinio is involved in all you can eat.
So we see that as part of the mix. It's not the whole solution, but we, like others, have an all-you-can-read product, we call it.
Right, oh yes.
And so, which we're launching next month. And I think that has to be kind of, what do they call it when you say in the energy, all the above strategy, as we call it. So all the above strategy of, yes, you have your individual apps that you're selling. Yes, you're in newsstands like Zinio and others. Yes, you can be in an all-you-can-read environment. Yes, you can participate in library placement or in-flight placement. So there has to be a comprehensive view because it's not just one. It's not just a one-channel world anymore.
Right. Okay. What's your own experience? Because I know operations like Readly, Next Issue Media. You're into that. I mean, is it? My perception is the figures are relatively low, and it's not taking off in the way that people anticipate, whether that's discoverability rather than anything else.
Yeah, I mean, it's discoverability, it might be habit, it's still early. We were obviously impressed by the experience we saw in Japan this morning. So, but I think that you're right, that it's still a very nascent part of the business, but there is reason to believe when you look at other media that it may be something that's, that gets traction over time.
Right, okay. Any questions from the floor? If not, as time is ticking away and we need to move on, but thank you again, Kelly.
Okay,
great.
You're welcome.